Disney's all-time favorite classics presents Pocahontas. "Where is Pocahontas?" asked Chief Powhatan. Everyone in the village had turned out to welcome home their leader and his brave warriors. Everyone, that is, except Powhatan's beloved daughter, Pocahontas. As usual, Pocahontas was off on an adventure with her two friends, Meeko the raccoon and a hummingbird called Flit. Her best friend, Nakoma, eventually found Pocahontas standing on her favorite cliff, lost in thought. "Your father's back," Nakoma called. Pocahontas excitedly headed home. She was anxious to tell her father about the dream she kept having, a dream about a spinning arrow. She knew it meant something exciting was about to happen. But what? Powhatan smiled when he heard his daughter's account of her dream and its meaning. "Something exciting is about to happen," he said. "Coquom is asked to seek your hand in marriage." Then he gave his daughter a necklace. It was the same necklace her mother had worn at her wedding to Powhatan many years before. Although Pocahontas was greatly moved by her father's gift, she did not want to marry Coquom. He was certainly the bravest and most handsome of the young warriors, but he never smiled. And besides, she had a feeling her dream was pointing her down another path. So she went to see Grandmother Willow for advice. "What is my path?" Pocahontas asked. "How am I ever going to find it?"
"All around you are spirits, child,"
the wise tree spirit said.
"They live in the earth, the water, the sky. If you listen, they will guide you."
As if in response to Grandmother Willow's words, a breeze began to blow. Pocahontas ran to the shore and climbed the cliff, hoping to hear what the wind was telling her. That's when she saw a sight she had never seen before. It was the Susan Constant, its sails flapping in the breeze. The ship had sailed all the way from England, bringing settlers to the land where Pocahontas lived. The first one of the ship was John Smith. Smith was anxious to explore this new land, especially after being cooped up on the ship for several months. He had been given a special assignment by Governor Ratcliffe, the leader of the expedition. "I'm counting on you to make sure that any Indians we find won't get in our way," Ratcliffe had said. "If there's anything like the ones I've seen before, it's nothing I can handle," Smith had replied. Now, on shore, Smith wandered quite close to the spot where Pocahontas had hidden herself. Meeko the raccoon couldn't resist the chance to investigate the stranger and ran out to greet him. "You're a strange-looking fellow," Smith said, holding out a biscuit. Meeko was so excited with the gift that he nearly gave away Pocahontas' hiding place. But just then, a bugle sounded, calling Smith back to the other settlers. Smith had been summoned to watch Governor Ratcliffe plant the British flag. Ratcliffe said he was claiming the new land for his king and country, but all he really cared about was the gold and other riches he hoped to find. Ratcliffe was ruthless and ambitious. He had promised the settlers freedom and prosperity in a new land, but he was willing to risk their lives for his own personal gain. The only living thing Ratcliffe seemed to care about was his pug dog, Percy. Percy was so spoiled that he was carried around on a velvet cushion and fed better food than the settlers were given. Little Meeko soon made it his ambition to share Percy's luxuries. After the flag planting ceremony, Ratcliffe had the settlers begin to dig for gold. Meanwhile, a party of warriors had spotted the settlers putting up their encampment near the shore. When they reported this to their chief, Powhatan asked Kekata, the village medicine man, to find out what the arrival of the white man might mean. Kekata threw some powder on the fire. The smoke that rose from the flames took the shape of hungry wolves and of soldiers with weapons that spouted fire. Powhatan realized the situation called for caution. "Take some men to the river to observe these visitors," he ordered Coquom. "Let us hope they do not intend to stay." Meanwhile, John Smith was scouting in the forest when he sensed that he was not alone. Turning, he saw Pocahontas through the mist of a waterfall. They stared at each other for a long moment before Pocahontas darted away. "No, wait, please," Smith called after her. Then Pocahontas remembered what Grandmother Willow had said, to listen with her heart to the voices around her. So she decided to stop and listen to the stranger. As they got to know each other, Pocahontas realized that Smith had some odd ideas. For instance, he thought the Indians were savages, and he did not understand that all the parts of nature, people, animals, plants, even the wind and clouds, were alive and connected to each other. So she showed John Smith her world. Slowly, he started to see the colors and shapes of the wind and the rest of nature just as she did. When they parted at the end of the day, neither one wanted to say goodbye. Soon the tension between the settlers and Indians began to worsen. Ratcliffe had found no gold and was furious. He was sure the Indians were hiding it all. There had already been one confrontation near the settlers' encampment. One of the Indian warriors who had gone to observe the settlers with Coquom had been shot and wounded. "These white men are dangerous," Powhatan said, and gave orders that no one was to go near the settlers again. But Pocahontas ignored his order. She even ignored the warning of her best friend Nakoma, who told her to stay away from John Smith. Instead, when Smith came to meet her while she was out picking corn, she quickly left with him, leading him to Grandmother Willow's glade. That's when she found out that the settlers had come for gold. "What is gold?" Pocahontas asked. Once Smith had explained, Pocahontas told him that the only gold the Indians had was the golden corn they grew in their fields. They were still talking when Grandmother Willow joined the conversation.
"Hello, John Smith," she said.
Smith was shaken. "Pocahontas, that tree is talking to me," he blurted out.
"Don't be frightened," the tree spirit told him. "My bark is worse than my bite."
Soon, Grandmother Willow and John Smith were chatting away as if they had known each other for years. Pocahontas was pleased that Grandmother Willow approved of her new friend. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the shouts of two settlers who were looking for Smith. Smith realized he had to get back to the settlement. When Pocahontas reached home, she discovered that the Indians were preparing for battle. She went to her father and begged him to talk to the settlers instead of fighting. "It's not that simple," Powhatan replied. He was convinced that the settlers were not interested in talking. When Smith returned to the settlement, he tried to explain to Governor Ratcliffe and the others that the Indians had no gold, only corn. He also explained that the corn was food and that the Indians would be happy to share it. But the governor wasn't interested in even looking at the corn Smith had brought him. Ratcliffe made his position absolutely clear. "Anyone who so much as looks at an Indian without killing him on sight will be tried for treason and hanged," he said. Smith still believed that it might be possible to keep the peace with the Indians. So that night, he met secretly with Pocahontas at the enchanted glade. Pocahontas suggested that Smith should come to her village and talk to her father. He was reluctant until Grandmother Willow convinced him that someone had to take the first step towards peace. "All right, let's go talk to your father," Smith said. Pocahontas was overjoyed and threw her arms around him. Just then, however, Coquom stepped into the glade. Nakoma had sent Coquom after Pocahontas because she was worried for her friend's safety. When the young warrior saw Pocahontas in the arms of Smith, he attacked. Smith's friend Thomas arrived just in time to see Coquom with a knife raised against Smith. He fired his musket and Coquom fell to the ground, dead. "Thomas, get out of here," Smith yelled. When a party of warriors appeared moments later, they dragged Smith away. Powhatan condemned Smith to die at sunrise, and he had harsh words for Pocahontas. "Because of your foolishness, Coquom is dead. You have shamed your father," he said. Meanwhile, Thomas carried the news of Smith's capture back to the settlement. Ratcliffe used the information to inspire the settlers to fight. This was what happened, he told them, when someone tried to befriend the Indians. He soon had them steamed up and ready for battle. Meanwhile, Pocahontas had wandered back to the enchanted glade. She was heartbroken, but could not think of any way to help Smith. She was holding Smith's compass, which she had given to little Meeko. The compass arrow began spinning wildly, then suddenly stopped. It was pointing towards the sunrise, and John Smith. Pocahontas realized it was the arrow from her dream. She began to run in the direction the arrow was pointing. Just before sunrise, the Indians arrived at the place of execution. The settlers were also marching, armed and angry, to the same spot. It seemed that nothing could prevent bloodshed now. Then, just as Powhatan raised a huge club over Smith, Pocahontas appeared. She threw herself over Smith and shouted, "No! If you kill him, you'll have to kill me too. Look around you. This is where the path of hatred has brought us." No one moved. Then Pocahontas said, "You have the power to change that, father." Powhatan heard the wisdom of his daughter's words. "From this day forward, there will be no more killing," he announced. "Let us be guided instead to a place of peace." When the Indian warriors put down their weapons, Ratcliffe yelled, "Now's our chance, men! Fire!" But the settlers had finally understood how greedy Ratcliffe was. They lowered their weapons too. In desperation, Ratcliffe reached for a gun and fired at Powhatan. John Smith hurled himself in front of the chief and was shot instead. The settlers were enraged. They grabbed Ratcliffe, put him in chains, and dragged him to the ship. The next day, the settlers readied the Susan Constant to set sail for England. The Indians brought blankets and food for their journey. John Smith lay on a stretcher, ready to be carried on board. Thomas told Pocahontas that Smith would die if he stayed behind. "Going back is his only chance," Thomas explained. Powhatan placed his own cloak over Smith. "You are always welcome among our people," he said. "Thank you, my brother." Then Pocahontas approached Smith. She had brought a small pouch for him. "It's from Grandmother Willow's bark," she said. "It will help with the pain." "Come with me," John Smith begged. Pocahontas looked to her father for advice. "You must choose your own path," Powhatan said. Then Pocahontas looked at the Indians sharing food with the settlers. It was the first sign of peace, and she had made it happen. Suddenly, Pocahontas realized what her dream had meant and what her path must be. She would continue working for peace between her people and the newcomers. As Pocahontas watched the Susan Constant sail away, a gentle wind whispered in her ear. She knew that the same wind would carry John Smith safely home.